Good evening. Welcome along. Another edition of Inspire and Be Inspired, our weekly motivational conversations and life hacks. Today, I am extremely excited to welcome along my esteemed guest. And usually at this time, I get a little bit kind of nervous, but I feel quite relaxed today because I know it's going to be a rather gentle interview. Colin Williams is a gentleman that probably needs no introduction to many of you, and yet at the same time, he is a very shy person away from behind the camera. And so I'm looking forward to bringing him on today. I want to start off by welcoming along everybody watching us live and yourself if you're coming back and watching the recording. Thank you for being here. All of our friends who are watching live, feel free to leave a comment, leave any questions. Start off by saying thank you to Carol. Thank you for your comments. Nice to see you with us. And the many other people who are watching live. Hi, Joanne. And as you know, when we get deep into conversation, it's very difficult for me to interrupt my guests. So I will be sure to read back any comments, any questions. So if there's any point that you want to ask Colin something, please feel free and we will get to address them. Shouts out to Tomo. Hi to Fernando. Welcome. Without further ado, let me flick on over and say hi to Mr. Colin Williams. You are muted. Why are you muted? I've muted myself in Zoom. Sorry, I muted myself then. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I think we were talking before we came on about me messing around with technology. I think I've added a mute button to when I flick over to this screen. So I need to sort that out. So, welcome everybody. Actually, before we begin, I got to say we are honoured. We got Mr. Stevie Zoo with us. Sorry, Bobby. It's because I'm looking he's on Stephen's profile. So shouts out to Bobby. Welcome along, my man. Welcome. And everybody else that threw me then. Right, let me ground myself and begin. Welcome along, Colin. How are you?
Evening, Andy. Evening, all. It's weird because after so many years behind the camera and spending a lot of my day talking to people on Teams and Zoom and WebEx, this feels really weird. And it's something I've refused to do for nigh on 30 years. So I see it as being a privilege and an honor to do this on your page because we go back so far and because you're so super cool when you do this stuff.
Thank you very much for saying so. It is an honour, and I can already see from the many people who are watching, they are going to be extremely interested in everything that you've got to say. You are much loved, much respected, held in such high regard all around the world by people that many of us could only ever dream to be friends with, and we're going to get to that. I do like to make this as interactive as I can, so let me say again, shouts out to Esther, hi to Bruce Q, Mr. Rogers, hi to Chan Smith, Mr. Reed, shouts out to you, brother, thank you for being here. Deborah McNally asks a question, bear this in the back of your mind. When are you going to host an exhibition of your photos from down the years? Okay, I know there's part of the answer to that, and Andrew Carthy, Rosemary Mason as well. So again, please allow me to repeat. We will get to any questions. We will get to any comments when we can. But let me now focus purely.
We do know, right? That's another legend we've got there. Andy Carthy, Mr. Scruff, right? That is the legend, Mr. Scruff. So, Mr. Carthy, good to see you, mate.
Wow, we are honoured. We are honoured indeed. Always keen to say we can't capture a life story in the few minutes that we share on these interviews, and especially a life story that goes back as extensive as yours. I don't mean in years. I'm not saying you're an old fart. I just mean you've lived a lot, right?
Yeah. I mean, let's be honest, right? I'll call it now. I'm mid-50s. And the reason why I'm so proud to say that, and I often say this to my kids, it means I've lived a number of eras that will never be repeated on so many levels. Integration from a social point of view, evolution of music as we know it, parties of which we'll never see again because society has changed. A street culture that was about togetherness and about family and underpinned by music, and color didn't really matter back then. So when I look at the 40 years I've had growing up to get to this point now, I almost look back on it with fondness, sometimes a little bit of disappointment, because as I can say now, I'm almost counting down rather than counting up. But the 40 years I've lived are, 40 years that felt like 200 years, but the most amazing 200 years that you could ever imagine.
Indeed. So you say 40 years. You mean 40 years from when you came of age, not from when you were born.
Yeah, well,
Come on, put a year on it. Put a year on it. The year you were born.
1965. Okay. Right, so I'm a proper grown up.
A big grown up. So, very briefly, we hear the same stories from so many people of the journey that we've all taken in the music path in the UK, depending on what part of the UK you were. All our stories are pretty much the same, and yet we all have different perspectives. So I'll be interested to hear from your point of view, your memories of growing up in Britain in the early 70s, multicultural Britain, and tell us about the landscape.
Yeah, so it didn't start multicultural. It started as an awful lot of polarized cultures. You had clear distinctions between white and black. This is pre-skinhead areas, pre-skinhead. So skinhead came later, but you had a real division between white and black. There was a real disparity in class. Black communities didn't have much money, and so in many cases, black communities stayed quite closely to each other, and there wasn't really this mass integration between blacks and whites on the surface. But then it changed. What changed that was music. On the streets, walking along the streets, you'd still walk along the streets and almost be fearful if you saw white faces of a certain type, because you had an expectation that it could end badly. But come the evenings, when we all went to a club or we went to a park, or if we did some sport, all of a sudden, music for me, and if I almost time it to about 12, 13, right? 12, 13, maybe 11, 12, 13. Music was the thing that allowed me to find like-minded individuals, regardless of color, who we had a bond, and music was the bond. I suppose I was a bit weird. So, we almost went through popular music, top of the pops, for those people who understand it. Popular music was the norm. And if ever you saw non-popular music on top of the pops or elsewhere, the likes of Eddie Grant and stuff in the early days, it was a shock to the system. So I actually was somebody who grew up listening to jazz. I was listening to jazz when I was about 9 or 10. My parents thought I was a bit weird because I love jazz. I still love jazz now. I don't listen to it as much as I used to.
But instrumental jazz or vocal?
Instrumental initially, then moved to vocal. So instrumental jazz, Art Blakey, drummer, John Coltrane. So I listened to a lot of I didn't really like traditional jazz, big band, brass band type jazz, but modern jazz I did. And again, it didn't make sense. What's a 9, 10, 11-year-old doing listening to jazz? So I grew up listening to jazz as a start. And I think that's what got me into understanding music structure and harmony and the formulation of music, and understanding really the granular elements of music, right? So that helped me there. I think I then almost superimposed disco sounds on top of jazz and ended up in this kind of melting pot of jazz and disco-y sounds. So, I've written it a few times. The first bit of vinyl I bought was in 1979. So that means I must have been circa, I'm guessing 14 doing the maths. And that was a Shalimar record called Take That to the Bank. And I remember I had no money. Paper rounds and pocket money didn't exist. Paper rounds gave you nothing. You delivered hundreds and hundreds of papers, and obviously left some in cupboards and corners and stuff. So you delivered half the papers, but still you deliver hundreds of papers in a row, and you might get a couple of quid. So it took a lot of weeks of saving to get this one 12-inch from our price called Take That to the Bank from Shalimar. And that was almost the first record I bought at about 14 years old. But I still never lost my love of jazz. So even through me going through disco, so I went from jazz to disco, and I think that jazz disco thing, we'll get to boogie in a minute because that's a big chunk of my life. But that whole jazz musical kind of melting pot of noises and sounds was really important to me back then. And I think my love of jazz, and if anyone who's my age will tell you about pirate stations. So if you look at DAB right now and you've got more stations you know what to do with, way back then you had a handful of stations. Most of them were pirates. Most of them were very hard to get access to. If you're a West Indian child, your father's music system, or the gram, as you call it, was absolutely something you could and should never touch.
Yeah.
You know, I'm lucky I'm still alive, because if ever I'd been seen to touch it in my lifetime, I think I would have been gone. But somehow in secret, I used the gram. And I remember getting a coat hanger and sticking it into the back of the gram so I could get early pirates like Invicta and all the other stations. So my original jazz fix came from Charles. Giles Peterson was a pirate DJ on lots and lots of stations. And so Giles was one of the people who allowed me to, because a lot of my friends weren't really into jazz. They were into disco-y sounds and pop sounds. And I couldn't really find a way of hearing this jazz stuff. And so I'd get my jazz fix via Giles on everything that Giles was doing.
And this is at the age of 15, 16?
Yeah, maybe even earlier than that.
Wow.
I never left, but jazz has never left me. Jazz will never leave me. You know, you'll never believe it. If my friends are on this thread, they'll tell you that even if you don't see it now, because I'll never ever dance, ever. But way back then, probably from about 13 to 19, if you couldn't dance, you couldn't go out your house, right? So yeah, dancing was key. So if you put an early fusion jazz record on, way back then, you know, I would have been one of those people like the boys you probably saw in Birmingham, with the kerchief and the whopping down his head, and you had to go in. So yeah, so if I go back to the early days, jazz and disco, right, very early. So I went through all of the various. I've still got a lot of those disco records in storage. So jazz and disco early for me. Jazz never went. That then, I'm a North Londoner. I've stayed in North London all the way through. I don't think I could ever leave North London. And in North London, we had a real culture around, a street culture around disco boogie, disco funk, the whole weekender scene, all of that thing was a real North London Essex thing. So if there are Essex people on this thread, they'll tell you it was a North London Essex thing to a massive degree. So this is way before Southall. You know, you had events like Caister, the early Caister, when Caister was good. And so way before Southall.
Controversial.
Sorry, I've got to call it right. People know what I mean, right? Caister was the foundation of a lot of the things that we call music weekenders today when it was good. Then it ended up getting quite political and then splintered, and then it changed. But back then it was a kind of North London Essexy thing. And North London and Essex would end up in Great Yarmouth at Caister and various other places, Nebworth and whatever. So if you looked at all of that, and that's early age, right? This is like 13, 14, 15, 16. You've got this circular group of people who are living for nightclubs, weekenders, if you could afford to get there, however you got there. And it was all around this funk, boogie, disco sound thing that we really didn't understand. The disco part was pretty clear. But then the disco mutated into like a funk boogie sound, which then mutated into a jazz funky sound. And then that whole, I suppose, that trio of disco, boogie, jazz funk almost became the early foundational sound of the early dance music weekenders.
Okay.
A lot of people I still know now.
Let me ask you then, because everybody's pretty much more than aware of who the DJs were, who the influential DJs were back in the day. But for yourself, can you pinpoint those Trailblazers?
Yeah, slam dunk, easy. So if I put Jazz on a pedestal and he's still there, Giles is still there now. He doesn't realize it, right? Made it public. Right? You know, I think Giles is still a rock star. So Giles sits in the corner by himself. The most foundational DJ in my head was a guy called DJ Froggy, an Essex man, and he was the first person I ever saw beat mix on turntables. I'd never seen anything like that before in my life, and genuinely. He would, on early, I don't know what they were, I think they were even Technics 1100s or something, on early turntables, belt drive turntables, Froggy would beat mix Records, and he had a massive sound system. And wherever he played, he had a massive sound system. In a times when no one really had a sound system that sounded like a sound system. And so anybody who's probably my age, who grew up listening to funk, boogie, jazz funk, would have followed Froggy all over North London, Essex, because Froggy and his sound system then became the place that you went. Where Froggy was, the music would be great. Froggy would be there, Chris Hill would be there. I was fortunate, again, as a North Londoner, we had a seminal club called the Royalty in Southgate. And a lot of the jazz funk boogie famous people kind of cut their teeth in the Royalty, of which one of them is Paul Anderson. The other one is the late, great George Power, of which Paul was George's protege. But Froggy was before all of them. So Froggy was actually in the Royalty way before all of those. And Froggy and his sound system would be pretty much resident in the Royalty. And then everybody else then ended up using the Royalty as this 80s boogie soul disco mecca thing that all of us would converge onto at a weekend.
So I've heard the story many times. Just remind me the size of the venue, what kind of capacity?
It wasn't massive. And the most distressing thing, there are very, very few pictures of the inside of the Royalty. Very few. There's a hand, every now and again, once a year, you'll see me put one on my posts. It's like an anniversary of Froggy's death. So there's one there. There was an upstairs balcony. My guess is it's no more than 600 people, no more. But if you looked at I've seen some video clips that somebody took, and I actually do have some video footage and negatives in storage. I've got to try and find from the best part of 40 plus years ago. But there aren't many pictures of it. Right. But, a lot of the people that you know now, Pete Tong, a lot of these people who became famous, would have ended up going through the doors of Royalty almost as a punter in the crowd, dancing, singing, chanting.
Like a weekly pilgrimage.
Without a doubt.
Again, just to stop you very briefly, so much feedback, so many comments, lots and lots of people echoing your sentiments about these DJs and the venues. So guys, Colin will come back. He will get to read all of these comments. I'm sure he'll get to reply to them afterwards. So thank you.
I can notice. I'm going to call on one, Bentleys, right? So Lyndon's called out Bentleys.
So you can see them. Okay, well, listen, if at any point you want to draw reference to anything that people are saying, feel free.
Yeah, I just literally flicked onto the screen. So Bentleys is a club, I think Canning Town from memory. And again, it's the north, south, east, west thing, irrespective of your town, is something quite acute. I'm a North Londoner, proud to be a North Londoner. I remember we'd go to Bentleys, I think it was in Canning Town, and it wasn't safe, right? Genuinely wasn't safe. So Canning Town in general wasn't safe, period. But as a North Londoner going to Bentleys, you'd go to Bentleys, and I think Derek B's club. So Derek B used to play fantastic. I mean, the place was amazing. But just going to Bentleys, you almost went into Bentleys looking around thinking, it's going to kick off at any minute. So so Lyndon, big shout to Bentleys, right? But,
so let me ask a question that may be irrelevant. When you say it wasn't safe, was it because of a colour thing or just like a postcode thing?
So Bentleys was safe. Bentleys was a dance club, right? So Bentleys was a black and the white people who anyone who was relevant and was on the scene could go, right? It wasn't a black white thing. If you were right, you were right. But there definitely still would have been, as a North Londoner, you'd still be careful when you went into other ends that weren't yours. And let's say East London in those days was pretty colourful, right? It's calmed down now. It's been very gentrified and it's turned into bloody Manhattan now, and everything's very expensive. But way back then, East London was the East London that you hear about in books, and it was a colourful place to be.
Right. Incredible. Okay, so I interrupted you when you started to tell us about the sounds, how they all merged into the foundations of the early dance scene and the early soul weekenders.
Yeah, so if I look at all of that, right, and there are lots of modern DJs that you hear about now, and you were fortunate to hear an amazing story from Steve, and Steve chronicled him and his brother's story and journey through. And a lot of the people that Steve mentioned, I would have mentioned in a similar. I think Steve and Bobby are 3 years older than me or something like that. So I kind of grew up in a similar world. So if you didn't go to clubs like royalty, if you didn't go to weekenders, you kind of went to parties, right? So you went to Shake and Finger Pop, you went to things that Norman was doing, you went to things that Trevor was doing, you went to a lot of those, let's say, closer knit things. So a lot of the people who are now today's rock stars, Trevor, Norman, Bobby and Steve, sadly the late great Paul, a lot of those people grew up from the street scene. And they grew up, and Bobby did a really good job in explaining it. They grew up doing house parties and street parties, because way back then, it's sad to say it, you couldn't be a black person and can go to a club promoter in the early days and say, can I rent out your club, or can I have your beautifully manicured 500 capacity club for an awful lot of black folk for a Friday or a Saturday night? It just didn't happen, right? So you created your own party, house party, your own scene somewhere, and that's where a lot of the people who've lasted the course started back then. They started with vinyl back then. They started by getting a signature sound of their own back then, and a lot of that was a funk disco sound. And a lot of them, if we take the likes of Norman, right? If you listen to Norman, Norman can play through the genres, because Norman kind of started out as a music player of good music across the tracks, and Norman's continued doing that today. A lot of the people who became famous, Pete Tong grew up through that scene. Right? I remember Pete Tong, when Pete Tong was in that whole set, and then obviously mutated into becoming a rock star, record producer, label stable person. Simon Dunmore, I've still got photos of a very young Simon Dunmore. All of those early sessions, if you remember early doors, Simon was I think at Cool Tempo, Bob Masters, Sleeping Bag Records. A lot of those people that you see are still on the scene now all came through that scene.
Well, the thing is as well, because looking back with hindsight and seeing how just global the sound has become, and how, as you say, the rock stars that many of these people have become, we have to remember how small, relatively speaking, the scene was. It was a very underground scene, even though there were a lot of people going out on a weekly basis to different venues. It was still part of the underground. That's why you had your Sharon and Tracy clubs and whatever, and we had the music of quality where you would go out. There was a distinct separation, wasn't that? And it was a very small scene.
Right, so I actually can't dismiss that, because that was a big chunk of my life. If I go to 16, 17, maybe even 17. And when you're 16, 17, you can bluff and start blagging your way into anything. I live in North London, I live in Edmonton, and Tottenham was the hub of everything, right? That's where all the clubs were. There were two massive clubs. Well, one was small, one was huge, 2,000 capacity. The other one was about 900, I'm guessing, on a good day. And they were across the road from each other, literally opposite each other. I remember blagging my way into the smaller one as a DJ, playing alternative music. Let's call that funk, soul, disco stuff. Alternative music was the name for the stuff that wasn't pop, right? So I'd get a half an hour, 40 minutes of the alternative music, almost to make the night a bit cool. And that's where at 16, 17 or something.
Alongside Spandau Ballet and Duran Duran.
Spandau Ballet, 60s crazy half hour with everyone was doing rock around the clock and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, God.
So I did that. But the key thing is it kind of made me well known in Tottenham, right? In this club. And dare I say, in the early days, in the kind of middle of the road clubs, black people didn't really go in there, right? You kind of, and I hate to say it this way so stark, you kind of weren't really welcome, right?
Yeah.
If they were pop clubs and they were predominantly white, and black people had their own kind of other clubs. So when I started playing, the original one was a club called Elton's. I started playing in there, and then slowly more and more, everyone on the door was, I'm Colin's cousin. And before you knew it, about 100 people were Colin's cousin in this club, right? So after a while, it just became quite normal. But I remember playing in that club, really young, probably underage, and I was playing with a guy called Steve Walsh, who was the you what, I found love in type person. And he was from the same case to scene as well. And then I was also playing there with an early Kiss FM DJ, a guy called Dean Savon, who worked with Nick Power in Music Power Records, the wonderful Dean. So, if I looked at it, I did that cross the tracks thing where I'd kind of played the alternative stuff in between the mad stuff. And then that got me across the road to the big club, right? Okay. And because they were rival clubs, you weren't supposed to do that. But, I was a chatty person back then and got on well with people. So I actually then blagged my way into the big 2000 capacity club to say, okay, I'm doing really well in this little club. Can I do the alternative music in the big club as well? So then for years, and it was the Tottenham Ritzy. So it was originally in Mayfair, then became the Tottenham Ritzy, then became the Rhythm Zone and lots of other names. But it was a 2000 capacity club. So I remember doing a Monday night there, playing alternative music, and there'd be 1,400 people there. Or on a Saturday night, there'd be 1,800 people there. Or Christmas Eve, there'd be 2,000 plus people there. And in between the Rock Around the Clock and the Bill Haley medley and whatever it's going to be, I would play some acid house and have all of my friends with their eyes glazed up doing that for 40 minutes while Colin's playing some Todd Terry or some crazy acid house and stuff. So I was fortunate that through my formative years of DJing, I did all the cool stuff. I did a bit of the cross the track stuff, but I wasn't afraid to go into a club and try and break a new sound into a big audience and say, sod it, I don't give a shit, right? You're going to listen to, and what pleased me most of all is in the early days, he's still a friend of mine now. In the early days, we used to book Capital Radio DJs because Capital Radio was the hub of the world, London station. So Pat Sharp, Martin Collins, all the Capital Radio DJs. And I remember I encouraged the manager at the time to book a DJ from an up-and-coming pirate station called Steve Jackson, right? There's a pirate station, it wasn't even legal, right? And I remember we booked Steve Jackson to go and play house music in our big 2000 capacity pop club. So I think the maverick in me from a music point of view came from the fact I didn't give a shit, right? Let's get some good music. And I'm going to try and find a way of shoehorning our music, the sound I wanted to hear, in the midst of all the madness, and be under no illusion. Our Ritzy was the same as every other Ritzy. So the lion's share of the club would be mad stuff. And dovetailed between the stuff that we wanted to play.
So you've skipped forward. You start talking about Todd Terry and the likes. You're moving into the later part of the 80s now. Alongside the music, you did talk about sport. You were heavily into sport as well.
Yeah. So I was a sprinter and an average footballer. And the reason why I say I was an average footballer is anyone who's normally fast cannot translate that speed into something sensible on a football pitch. You can get from there to there really quickly, and then it all goes to shit, right? Well, I was the winger that you give the ball to, and pray to God that I'd find a way of getting across to somebody else, but assume my legs would get tangled and stuff. So I was a sprinter, county level sprinter. But I don't mind saying it. I'll try not to get wobbly. When I was 13 and a half, my mum died. So my mum died of cancer. I was 13 and a half. And so any desire to be anything more as a sports person went from me then.
So it had a profound effect, a daft question, but it had a profound effect on you.
Yeah.
Take your time. While you compose yourself, I'm just going to say hello again to everybody. So many people watching us. We've been on air for 30 minutes now. This interview will be recorded, so you can come back and catch up on the parts that you may have missed. I think it's going to be a lengthy conversation this evening. So if you do have plans, we definitely recommend you come back and check it all out when convenient. Colin is just telling us about 13 to 14 years of age, one of the most important moments in his life, losing his mum to cancer, taking his ambitions away from any kind of sporting stardom. So it took the wind from took your feet from underneath you, basically.
Yeah, it did. It did. I had a very, very supportive mum. She was a caring individual, a first generation West Indian woman. She was a nurse. She cared about everybody else more than she cared about herself. And I think that's where I got that wiring from. Am I perfect? No. Some people know me at work as pretty hard as nails, right? But inside, I've still got an awful lot of my mum's wiring. And I think when that happened, I changed my whole outlook on life. And I then said to myself, I've got to go forward and make a difference in this world. I've got to. I don't know what that difference is yet. No idea. But I've got to make a difference. And it sounds crazy, but I almost thought if I make a difference from being a fast runner, that's a bit lazy and a bit easy. In a way back then, that's what black people were expected to do. You're expected to be a sports person.
So without making you lose track of where you're going, everybody knows you have famous sporting friends who have done really well. Were they in your life back then?
No. So if I look at it's a honor, pleasure, gift. I've got some good friends. And
so they're not part of your landscape back then.
If I glance on this screen, I can see some people on this screen who I used to go to school with. And I speak to my daughters a lot about this. I still am friends with 20, maybe even 30 of the people that I knew from my school playground. A lot of those people who I knew then are the same people I knew now. A lot of those people who have helped me to stay true to all of those early childhood journeys are still friends now. So the sport thing for me was just a conscious decision that said, there aren't enough black people making a real difference. There are not enough black people who are captains of industry. There are not enough black people who are running companies. There are not enough black people who are on TV. If you look at now, it's different, but way back then, just about to get TV to work. There weren't enough black people. I coach a lot of people now, and I often say, and I didn't get this statement. It's a statement I've stolen from somebody else, and it was a statement. The statement's framed: "You can't be who you can't see," right? And if I look back then, that was the challenge I had.
You had no role models.
Yeah, I wanted to be someone, and I think the somebody I wanted to be wasn't going to be a sprinter. I didn't want to be a sprinter. There must have been more for someone like me, a keen, reasonably bright young black person who wanted to look forward and believe the world was his oyster. But what I looked forward into a void. I looked forward into a void, and I couldn't see anybody like me. So I almost said, whatever I do, it could not be being a sports person. And I actually didn't go to the county trials for that reason. Wow. I literally, that was the end of it. No more. Of course, I still did competitive sport and stuff, but I just made a conscious decision. If I'm going to be famous in this world, it will not be from being a sprinter or an athlete. There's got to be more than that.
Wow.
And I was also I was wired differently. So I don't mind calling out on this because what the hell. There was if ever you get a chance to watch, I can't remember which one it was. There were 4 short films mid last year. Small Axe was one of them, and one of the films was about a crop of 80s young black children that were gifted, and they were at the time they were pushed into schools for, let's say, not gifted kids. They were almost treated as being a bit mad. So I don't mind calling it out. I was one of those kids. Luckily, I stayed in a mainstream school, but I was one of those kids who got brought into the school headmistress's office with my parents to say, we need to find somewhere for Colin because he's fine. Well, to tell you what's happening, I was finding everything too easy. So they were saying, we need to find a school for Colin because this is not helping him. It's all too easy. And when I saw those videos, those films, I must admit I could have broken down because I remember my story. I remember still being in the headmistress's office with my dad there, and they're almost saying, we need to. In fact, they were saying in a positive way, we need to have a word with you about your son because your son's quite gifted and we'd like to find somewhere for him. But where was that way back then? Where was that place? So crazily, just to show you how things can flip the other way, rather than sending me to somewhere that gifted children go to, they sent me to the worst school in the world. There were 2 worst schools in our borough, and I went to one of the 2 worst schools in our borough as a senior school. Because back then,
so what was the reasoning behind that?
I'm sad to say it was the early days of racism, right? Young black kids were nothing, nobody. So rather than take someone like me and put me in a special school for gifted children to learn to go and do amazing things, the whole thing was get shot of him, kind of put him in the school with all the other bad kids because he's going to amount to nothing. Crazily, that was the best thing that ever happened to me, because that same school, which is long since closed down, was where I met those same friends that I've known all of my life and have been through me all of my life. And we all went through amazing, life-changing childhood, societal experiences that we all talk about fondly. But yeah, crazily, I probably should have been at some super duper school and been nurtured and coached into doing amazing things. But instead, I went to the craziest school.
Was it Tottenham County?
No, it was a school called Ambrose Fleming.
Ambrose Fleming. Betty Conte says, we turned out okay.
Yeah, we turned out okay. We turned out okay. The two worst schools in our town at the time was a school called Mandeville, which half of my best friends come from, and Ambrose Fleming, which the other half of my best friends come from. So rather than reject that culture is the fabric of my life. And rather than be something that destabilized or debilitated me or destroyed me, it was the thing that enhanced me and built me up and gave me the fuel to continue trying to be the best person I could be.
Very, very, very impressive to hear, and put so eloquently as well. Loads and loads of people commenting, loads and loads of people giving us feedback. Okay, so let's continue down the music path then, and we will come back to how you changed the world outside of music a little later on. So tell us about the progression of you behind the turntables, and did you ever have and by this time were you working full time, by the way?
Yeah, so I didn't really stay on at school. I kind of went to, more sad stories. I kind of had to leave home because my dad was mad. He's passed away now, so there's no emotion now. But I didn't speak to my dad for 23 years. My dad was a bit crazy in his own way, but I suppose a lesson to everybody on this call: if you have a parent, and for whatever reason you and that parent are estranged, get closure. I know it's difficult. Find a way of getting closure. So, my mum passed away when I was younger, and my dad brought us up and did his best job as he could. I've got two sisters, wonderful sisters. I'm a middle child. My dad didn't take to me for some reason, bless him. And so my dad wasn't one of the nicest people in the world to me. So I got to about 17, 18, and I had to leave home and just go and find somewhere to live and, use whatever coins I could get to rent a place, and that's it, moved out of house. I think where I was going with that is because it didn't really allow me to go into further education as such, but I didn't really want to. I kind of wanted to get into the world and earn some money and make a living and just go forward. So I was already just kind of scrabbling around. I did everything. There are people in Enfield who know me. I worked in our town McDonald's forever. I did anything I could just to get some income, right, to pay my bills. And the music thing was fueled by the clubs I mentioned. So I was quite fortunate. So on one side of my life was all over the shop, but then on a Monday, on a Wednesday, on a Friday, on a Saturday, I was either in Elton's or Ritzy or Mayfair, as was. Again, playing vinyl. So way back then it was vinyl. And with my records, playing my alternative set of records. And so I'm quite happy to say I was one of those DJs that grew up on vinyl from the early days. Probably playing vinyl from when I was in earnest, 16, 17 upwards onwards, right? And they've never stopped since, until I obviously parked all the vinyl. But played vinyl in the early days, right? With early 1200s that drifted all the damn time before they got to Mark IIs that stopped drifting. So yeah, you've had to learn how to chase the mix, man, because 1200s would drift. So that was that. I think I didn't really change my music style. So even though I played in a mainstream club and I had to have lots of housey sounds, right? So I grew up through early acid house. Flipping back again, if I do the running in parallel with this 80s boogie funk scene was the mad, crazy drug acid house warehouse scene, right? Mm-hmm. Right. So, as somebody who's always on both sides of the tracks, right? On one side of the world, I was in this lovely jazz funk. Everyone's well dressed. dancing, doing all that stuff on the other side of the world. And I don't take drugs, I don't drink, never have done. I was with this other mad driver around the M25 looking for a warehouse or a field with a big sound system, with most people with their eyes about to fall out of their heads, taking ease and listening to acid house music. So I did all of that, right? Did all of that, Fast Eddie, did all of that, Fingers Inc., did all of that, and loved all of that, but never ever got rid of this other thing that always ran alongside. So I always still had boogie, jazz funk, all those sounds running alongside all the other sounds that were important in the clubs I played in. But if you come back to what music I really love, so if all of that stuff that I'm talking about is in storage now. So a lot of those Rhythm is Rhythm, a lot of those early Transmat track records, they're all in storage, right? All sitting in storage. The music I continued with all the way through until I think it probably, the best way to time check this would have been mid to late 80s, when I started to realize that this soulful, funky boogie scene, Prelude, all that kind of stuff, which is disco-y scene, was spawning into a US house scene, right? Early US house scene, early bloody expensive vinyl US house scene, which probably made Nick Power very, very rich and all the other people in central London. But that's what it was. And so effectively the boogie, Prelude, all those early 80s boogie records, I kind of slowly started to pare back that to go all into early US house. Okay. I mean, all in, right? Because I almost could find the same dance floor culture I wanted in boogie, I could find in US Soulful House at 122 to 124 beats per minute. And that's kind of that's probably the most seismic change for me in music. Because if I'm honest, people who know me now will know that irrespective of where house goes and whether it goes up and down through the various genres, I've stayed in that soulful swim lane all the way through. Because I think it's closest to my 80s boogie roots, and the musicality of soulful house music is still important to me. So that's probably the most seismic change for me, because from then, that then became the sound I pretty much played from the mid to late 80s, all the way through the crazy soulful house 90s, I suppose permeated with UK garage, right? So I can't get away from that. If I jump over to that for a second, if I take if Nick Power was on this thread, Nick Power used to run a record shop, huge record shop in Haringey, Wood Green area, another one in Ilford. So Nick had all his roots in the areas I'm mentioning. So Nick's music shop, if you didn't go to a black market and places like that, and Uptown and City Sounds and all the other stops in central London, you went to Music Power. But if I look at all of that, all of those sounds then became the soundtrack of my life. All of those soulful house sounds were the same sounds that we originally pitched up to become speed garage, which then became the same sounds that we then cut up to become UK garage and two-step, right? But it all spawned from a US soulful house sound. So that was an important time for me, because again, I don't seem to leave a music style behind. I just tack on another one alongside it. So I continued to stay with my US soulful house music scene. And when I go into stories next year and start saying some of this, I'll find hundreds of records that are still in the shrink wrap without me even cutting them with my fingernail, because I bought them, loved them, meant to play them, but never got around to opening them. I never got around to opening them. And as Nick would tell you, that's why he's so damn rich. I probably bought everything.
Well, you mentioned Nick, and really this should be part of his story, which will be told at some point. Yeah. Touch on Iron Apple for us, because I think that's where we really got talking.
Well, here's where I get a chance to spring over, because that's what happened. We were. I remember I went to Iron Apple, 94, I think it was, and I went to an Iron Apple with a bag of Soulful House, US Soulful House records, and what was the early UK garage four to the floor music. So think Grant, think Booker. I was not a fan of two-step, three-step, even though my mates, Fooney and Mikey and Timid, they're all mates of mine. Lovely sound, but I'm a 4/4 person, right? So I went to Iron Apple with US Soulful House and what I'd call UK four to the floor house. Again, jumping around. We had a bit of a Sunday scene in the UK. So you'll hear about the UK Sunday scene. That was the dawn of everything. So this is even Twice as nice. That was initially a US Soulful House pitched up scene, right, where people danced. A lot of that spawned UK producers like Booker, like Ricky Morrison, like Grant, who then came out with a UK sounding Four to the Floor sound, which then became a UK sound. So I went to INAPA, 94, and INAPA was nothing back then. Everyone was still in Ibiza. I remember texting.
Nick was, I hear many times, and I could be incorrect, I hear Nick is the godfather of INAPA. How did that come about?
I don't want to admit it because his head will just get big and he's too rude as it is, right? So Nick actually had ran a club in INAPA. Right? Nick was a UK man, but he had a club in INAPA, right? So he came back and forth to Cyprus. It's called the Cool Club. It was 94, and there was no scene. There was nothing. INAPA then was an R&B square, right? With a splittering of other things, and Nick was holding his own in the Cool Club. So I remember I went there with one of my football friends and one of my best mates. And the only reason why we went to INAPA was it was no more scientific than the previous year we'd gone to Ibiza. And Ibiza was a bit too loony and a bit too druggy and a bit too mad, and the music was a bit rubbish. So we kind of said, we've got to go somewhere else next year, and I want to be able to take some music out there that I can play that sounds good. So we pretty much contacted Nick and said, we're going to go INAPA. Can we play some music in the Cool Club? And so literally it was me, Nick, Ramsey, right? So this is Ramsey, pre-Ramsey and fan, playing US pitched up Soulful House in the Cool Club in 94-ish, before there was even really a scene. So depressingly, that does give Nick a bit of a time check that says, in the early days when there really wasn't a scene, there was the Cool Club. And Nick was the person who owned the Cool Club and pretty much played the only decent music in INAPA at the time. Black and White played R&B, good quality R&B, but the Cool Clubs we went to hear this UK house sound thing. And then effectively, I didn't go back to Ibiza. I stayed.
So skip forward a few years to when I would have visited INAPA. One very famous year where it was like half the Premier League. Carnage. All in the square. So that's all down to you taking one or two of your football friends, and it was good. It was a good holiday for all of these top tier Premiership footballers to go just before pre-season training kicked off, right?
We called it Footballers Fortnight. So it genuinely, there was almost like from about the 14th of July to about the end of July-ish was about a fortnight where you could get away and do some stuff before pre-season training. So you're right. INAPA got to a point where if you went to the square, you'd find Man U, West Ham, Arsenal, Chelsea. You'd find the cream of the crop Premiership, in many cases, not being recognised, just completely and utterly arms in the air, jumping up and down, because a lot of the cool people were in Ibiza still, right? So Ibiza still had all the people who wanted to be seen. If you didn't want to be seen, and you just wanted to have a great party, you went to INAPA. I've still got a picture of when INAPA then blew up and Radio 1 came out there. And I've still got a picture of Nissy Beach when Radio 1 were on Nissy Beach. And it was like pretty much a UK garage thing. I think Spoonie was on stage and whatever. And this picture shows Nissy Beach with just people everywhere. And I'm thinking, in the early days, and INAPA was a little bloody village, right? INAPA was nothing, nowhere. You came out Larnaca, did the mad, life-changing, scary drive from Larnaca to INAPA. Hope that you survived it, with half your records being confiscated by the bloody people at Larnaca Airport. And then you went to INAPA, and then the whole world just blew up. And you're right, from 94 to, I'm guessing, 2003, INAPA went on strong, went from strength to strength, then sadly got a bit lawless. Clubs got
to say the least. To say the least.
Oh my God. But it was just a spectacular time of life. I mean, me and my boys are thinking of doing a one last road trip to Napa next year as almost see if we can go back after so many years. We've got great friends out there. The castle is still out there. We got, big shout out to George Coxey, who we met in 1994 and who headlines in the castle now, still flying the flag from way back then, playing good music. So yeah, Iron Apple was a very key point. I didn't go back to Ibiza. It sounds crazy. I didn't go back to Ibiza from the early days when I kind of left Ibiza to go Iron Apple until I first went back there 6 or 7 years ago with Groove Audition Ibiza. I hadn't been back to Ibiza since.
Wow. Madness. So in all this time, so many stories, so many tales to tell. I'm gonna have to skip it forward a little bit to you said about the turn of the century, the early 2000s. Had you actually picked up a camera by this point? Well, actually, of course you had. Stupid. Yeah, I say, we got talking, to my memory, one of the Iron Appers. I remember that we really started talking, and we kind of connected because I've got a really nice photograph that you captured of myself interviewing Wookie on the beach.
Yes, right. I know the photo.
And so you obviously had the camera there. Tell us how all that came about.
So I had the camera from about 17, which is why, and I will. It's the only name drop I'm going to make today. Single name drop only. I'm not going to do any more. Louis sent me a WhatsApp before this, and Louis's words are the same words everybody else moans at me about, which is, you got to do a book, you got to do a show, you got to get out all those photos, right? Because a lot of the photos I've got are from when I was 17 upwards, and they're still on negatives, they're still on 35mm slides in storage, and even I haven't seen many of them because I couldn't afford to actually turn them into prints. Couldn't afford to. Right. So they're still in reels of negatives and slides. So
do they ever, show my ignorance, they don't, what's the word, degenerate? Deteriorate.
So I, luckily,
degenerate.
I did actually pack them pretty well, but I've got a storage unit I've had for bloody years. The last time I did check, there were some that had started to, because they kind of, it breaks down. And I put them in these special things that reduces that. But after 20 plus 30 odd years, they break down. So some will be unrecoverable, but lots of them are still okay. And lots of them are actually, and the people don't realize, you'd see TV films or projector slides that are a lot of my early images were on 35mm slides, right. And they do survive pretty well. So I've got boxes and boxes of slides, right? Okay. So if I go back, I started taking photos badly at about 17, 18.
Ket just came in, hiya my man, saying that you definitely had a camera. I think, was it Tenerife? He said 1990.
Tenerife. Oh God, I forgot
Tenerife, 1990.
Yes. I did Tenerife as well. I forgot about that. I did Bobby's Bar in Tenerife and stuff, playing music and taking photos in Tenerife as well. So yeah, that's where I really got to know Roger. Mm-hmm. So Roger was the god in Tenerife. Roger, Ket, they were some of the Tenerife gods back then. So Roger's parties and stuff was still big. I got to know Roger from Tenerife.
Brilliant.
There are photos from there. But yeah, probably 17, 18, I started taking photos in earnest. I've somehow bought a Canon camera and then stuck with Canon all the way through. I changed it. I've changed a few times to other brands and then eventually bought back Canon again. There are images probably from nigh on 40 years ago to various degrees of all of this journey. Some of the earlier images are nowhere near the quality from a composition point of view as now, because A, I didn't know what I was doing. B, I didn't know what I was doing, right? So if I look at them now, I go, oh my God, you took a photo that bad. But yeah, so in fact, that's a good point, because if I looked at some of those earlier weekenders, like Case as a case in point, I remember meeting Alex at an early weekender, right? And I was a southern person, barely crossed the M25. In fact, it wasn't even built then. So I would never have really wanted to go out of town, because whatever car I had would never have been reliable to get me more than 20 miles, much less 200 or 300. I remember bumping to Alex, and Alex saying, and if you know Alex, then Alex is as persuasive then as he is now, right? And I remember him saying, if I did a event up north, would you London people come? And I kind of went, up north, so up north just means further north from North London to another bit of North London, probably. But then when he started talking about Berwick and places like that, I could barely remember where that was on a map. So I met Alex at one of those earlier weekenders where Alex had just come down and said, I think he was just doing reconnaissance. to see what these things are all about. And then I think, and I was actually taking photos at those Caster weekenders as well, some of the earlier Caster weekenders. So I've got photos of Caster, I've got photos of Prestatyn weekenders.
Wow.
But I think I pretty much after I met Alex, I never did another Caster or Prestatyn again. I think I then started with Alex and pretty much stuck with it. In fact, just for this reason, I actually found these in the loft. I can't believe it. For once,
Let me just turn my aircon off.
All right. So these aren't all of them, right? But this just shows when I started working with Alex, I tried to remember to save as many programs as I possibly could. Right, so there you go. This is some early Caster ones. So there you go.
Wow. They all look in pristine condition as well.
Yeah, because I lost them. That's why. I got a bloke, right? If I'd actually been using it. So yeah, I think I probably got most of the programs, I think, from most of the weekenders for the best part of 30 years, apart from the one that I didn't go to, which is the first one.
Why?
Didn't go to Berwick because I couldn't afford to. And I couldn't think of a way of getting a car that would be reliable enough to get there. So yeah, all of mine stem from beyond Berwick.
That's it. That's impressing everybody. Carla, hiya. She's saying that. Wow.
And yeah, and then if you look at, if you find any of these, pretty much from about, I think it's probably from about, what's this one? This is the 5th weekender.
And I always remember with all of your passes, they got to a point where you stopped wearing them all. But for many, many years, you wore them literally like a badge of honor, right?
And there are loads, right? There are passes and lanyards from more events than I know what to do with. And the good news about this, and it's unusual for me to be so diligent, because I knew that if I put them anywhere else, I'd lose them. I kind of would have just, and that's why I found the programs. I had like a box, and every time I finished an event, I just threw it all into the same box, which is why the programs got saved. If I'd actually tried to put them somewhere, I would have lost them all by now. But yeah, that's why so even vocal booths, I've got vocal booths things in the same box where I just do an event.
Everybody's saying we need a book, we need an exhibition. Yeah. So come on, man, come on, get it into gear.
It will happen. I've got to finish my studies and then it will happen.
Okay, so your photography has improved down the years. It's taken you around the world.
Right. So whilst I've got everybody, right. I think you can see some. I didn't used to do this, but this was actually my daughter once said to me, "Why don't you?" Because I suppose children of this generation don't print anything; it stays on your phone as a digital image. Mm-hmm. And my daughter mentioned to me once, and I thought that's a good idea. So this is the spare room, and literally there are pictures in this spare room. But I actually then went downstairs and took some of them off the walls downstairs. So there's my friend Grant. This is a very, very important photo because it's one of those events that you just, if you were there, you knew that was heritage. Mm-hmm. This is one of the most memorable times of my life, right? For those people who remember this very, very difficult picture, right? This took 2 days of planning, and it was, I'd done a 52 or 51, sample 52 or 51. And I remember I sent a message around to everyone to say, there'll be a photo outside at a certain time and you can't be late because the sunlight's going to change. And I've got about 20 minutes of sunlight before the sunlight changed. And I remember running around trying to round up people from the various rooms to say, and there's a video, some nasty person's taken a video of me screaming and shouting at 400 people.
That'll be Sarah.
It's horrible, man. And literally, because I could see the sunlight changing, I literally had to stand on this mound and literally try and corral all these people to say, please stop peeing around. We've got no time. And then I had to just take the photo and pray to God it worked. And that's been one of the photos that makes me smile every single time. Here's an old one. I mean, this is just mad, right? Kerry Chandler mixing with his trainers, right? I mean, just some of these things. That
was the after party that I played out with him. That was the challenge that we had. Do you remember?
Yes. And Deuce Martinez was there, spin on his head or something.
Yeah.
That's a rare picture of Bob Jones, Snowboy, Webster, Mansell.
So these are all the images that you had displayed when they were previewing or premiering the Southport Weekend movie, right?
Yeah. But Sarah and Scully had asked me to pick some images that I liked. And so in probably 1 million images, I had to find a few that told the story. And in fact, the only picture I didn't print, which I wish I had done, and I will do one day, was some of the earlier Sounds of Blackness pictures, because that still for many is one of the most significant Southport Weekend moments ever. That's probably the only picture I didn't print. But all the others, I printed pictures of Louis and Kenny and, the Body and Soul back here. Chaka Khan's up there, Bodygun's over there, Patrice Russian's over there, Gregory Porter's over there, Sunsea Beats over there. So, I think where you're going is, I'm so pleased that Scully and Sarah encouraged me to print them, because I never would have done. I'd have done a couple, and I never would have had these. I gave some to. Another sad moment. I printed some and gave them to Alex and Dave on the very final Southport. So there's a picture that you'll see on my post every now and again of the stage of the very last Southport at 52. And it's me, Siobhan, Alex, Dave, Bob Jeffries, I think. And you'll see Dave holding.
Is Natasha on stage as well?
Natasha. And there might be a cake on one of them as well.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, because I knew it was the final event, I kind of printed some pictures and gave one to Alex and gave one to Dave. And when I look at that, obviously with Dave no longer here, you kind of look at it and think, what a significant picture. A picture with the pictures in, and obviously a picture with Dave, somebody so fundamental to Southport, and who's no longer here.
Mm-hmm.
So rest in peace, Dave.
Listening to that story, thinking about all of the other amazing memories that you've captured down the years, and every now and again you'll pull a little something out never seen before, previous unseen. I've just come across this. People are totally in awe. But if I may, I want to move away from the photography, move away from the music ever so slightly, because even though it's extremely interesting to sit and hear you tell these stories, there's a lot of this that people are more than aware of about yourself. Something that people won't really know too much about is your life away from music, your life away from taking the photographs. A very positive, a very inspiring person. So tell us how that translates into your day-to-day life now, your role in business, and what you've been doing for the last few years.
Couple of hats. So I've spent my whole life is a life in technology. I work in IT. I'm what people call a CTO, which is a pretty good job. So I look at the future. I try and make sense of complex technical things and devise technical strategies. And I've been in IT for 30 odd years. So it's weird because I've got a tug of war in my head. Normally, people who are IT people are very, very technical. They're very, very physics aligned, very, very binary. I've got a tug of war that half of my head is a physicist and half of my head's a social scientist. So I'm as encouraged and inspired by human existence as I am technology making a difference. So about 25 years ago, I decided to be a life coach, but it wasn't a thing. I don't know where I got it from. It wasn't. I intended to. I didn't want to do this. I think the wrestling I had in my head of, make people better, but this technology thing that I knew how to do, and I struggled with that. So I ended up trying to turn it into a system. So if I set up a life coaching business, I could then turn my very, very process aligned side of my head into lots of processes that said, okay, if a person has a challenge, life challenge, a coaching related challenge, I can then exhibit a system to help them to fix it. So there you go. I've got more bits and pieces. That is my original business card, right? So it's a metal business card. And that was from 25 years ago, when I set up my life coaching business called Creating Winners. And And that was the plan. The plan was going to be, I was going to stay out of technology, because almost, every now and again, you're quite fortunate that you can see the future. But I could see the societal turmoil we've got now with people trying to make sense of their existence. I thought that was going to happen 20 odd years ago. I couldn't see why it wouldn't, because I couldn't see how the evolution of humanity wouldn't result in people with more questions than answers. Every society is more intelligent than the previous one. But we're a society that grew up with technology, which allowed us to then make decisions and embark on things that are only bound by our imagination. There's nothing we can't do in modern society, right? Whether it's create a pandemic collapsing drug in a year or whatever it's going to be, or use bits of technology to turn weird things like this into the heart and soul of our lives. Technology allows us to pretty much be infinite in what we think. And all the way back then, I kind of thought technology will be as much a curse as it will be a cure in 10, 15, 20, 30 years time. And people almost forget how to be people. And they'll almost be so disillusioned about human existence. They're going to need coaches to help them to understand how they can make a difference, understand how they can use human values to engage with each other, understand how as a society we can be better. So all of that was the whole thing that started Creating Winners way back when.
Wow, so you were way ahead of the curve.
Yeah, look, I told you I was a bit crazy, right? So yeah, I'm a bit of a stargazer. So yeah, on my day job, even to this day, it's about big IT systems, big technology-based decisions. But as you all know from the conversations I have with people on Facebook or out of Facebook, I still love hearing about people, almost through a way of helping them to realize that the person they see today isn't the person that they, it's not the finished article, right? The person that you are now is only the person that you are at this moment in time. You've got to almost open and broaden your horizons to realize that the future ahead is built on lessons learned from the past and knowledge that you haven't yet taken on board. And if you find a way of bringing those two together, your future holds pretty much anything that your dreams can actually lay out for you. So a lot of my job is to allow people to believe that they're more than they realize they are. And as soon as they actually cross that chasm, then they start to move forward, looking at life as a massive opportunity without fear, rather than running away from something in their past. And that's kind of what I'm a run towards gain rather than run away from pain type person, which makes me a bit of a hard coach sometimes. I'm not one of these fluffy coaches. I'm one of these kind of quite tough coaches that kind of says, do you really want that? Yes. How much do you really want that? I really, really, really want that. So that means, what are you willing to do to get that? Anything. No, you're not willing to do anything. Let's get serious now. Let's be sensible. What are you willing to do to get that? That and that. By when? By then. And when you do that, what will it look like to you? How will you know you've got to that place? It'll look like this and it'll feel like this and I can do that. Right, let's start. So I still do that today.
And is that an actual, can people hire you to do that, or do you just do that?
So they used to be able to hire me, and I intentionally made myself so expensive that people couldn't hire me, which all that made that happen is people then started throwing more money at me, and I just thought, this is getting stupid. So the answer is just no. Because if I say yes, but it's this, then they go, all right. You go, oh, shit, that didn't work. So
why? Why though? Is it too draining, or?
It's in part it's draining, but that's not the issue. The issue is I've got quite a taxing day job. I don't like being, to use this horrible term, but I can't think of another one. I don't like being half pregnant on anything, right? So whilst my current employer,
I've never heard that before.
Well, it's true. I can't think of another way of saying it. But whilst my day job is the reason why my kids eat food and have a reasonable quality of life, I'm invested in making sure that the value my employer gets from me and the reciprocal value I'll get back from them is fair and equitable. So that's my primary thing. And so to be the coach I'd like to be would require me to compromise what I do in my day job, and I refuse to do that.
Okay.
Probably 2 years from now, I think I'll part one and flip to the other. But yeah, at the moment, I can't do it the way I'd want to do it, and I don't believe it's fair on either side to do it half-hearted.
Okay, well, conscious of not singling out any comments, but I just did read my My friend Jo, she said, "Can we have a 7 a.m. motivational chat every morning, please, Colin?"
7 a.m. at the moment, I'm normally panting on a treadmill, trying to get myself to do this daily run thing that people like Andy and Michelle make look so easy, but I just can't do.
Well, I know a guy who can give you a pep talk who will get your head around that.
Oh no!
Look in the mirror.
What
Look in the mirror. I got to say hi to Tony. You introduced me to Tony in Croatia.
Yeah,
She's saying lovely things about you.
Yeah, she was one of the. She's been a school friend of mine since we were about 12, 13.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I'd say a lot of the people that I'll speak to now I've known for the lion's share of my formative years and current life.
Brilliant. So an hour and 12 minutes into the conversation, we're going to run. We already agreed before we came on air. We're under no time constraints. So thank you. If you've just joined us, be sure to get the beginning part of this interview when the recording goes live. We're actually broadcasting on my own Facebook profile, on the Inspire and Be Inspired page. I was also broadcasting to YouTube, but I was getting lots of bots sending ridiculous messages, so I actually cut that feed to YouTube. But we're reaching far and wide, Colin, and getting a hell of a lot of replies and a hell of a lot of comments that I'm sure you've seen some of them. So you mentioned there about trying to not wanting to divide your time, and you mentioned for the first time your two beautiful children. Tell us about that part of your life.
Yeah, it's no secret, right? Everyone hears me talk about children. Everyone sees me write about children. You're the same as me. Michelle's the same as me in your investment in just how important your children are in making you whole as much as you are in making their lives the best lives they can be. I'm not somebody who wanted children, right? It's no secret. I don't mind saying that. It wasn't part of my original master plan. As I said back then, my original master plan was to change the world and do some transformational thing so I could look back as being, somebody young and black who was the person that future people young and black looked up to say, I want to be like Kim, because I couldn't see anyone like me, right? So I wanted future people to look and say, if I can't be who I can't see, there you go, there's the first one. But children for me were the most important and the most life-changing and the most profound thing that ever happened to me. And I don't mind saying, I still say it now, I just dropped my youngest off home. I still learn more from my children than I think I teach them. Because my children have taught me how to be a different person, how to be a person who gets out of bed with a purpose, with a cause. To not sound too morbid, there are times when, and it must be the same for every parent, I almost think fast forward and I go, there's going to be a day when I'm not going to be here and I won't be able to see them. And I almost think when I look at that, I go, that's just terrible. Because as much as I think they're getting an awful lot from me as their dad, I get so much from them just knowing that when I get out of bed, whether it's cold or it's rainy or I'm tired, or I've had a bad day the day before, or I got a cough or I got a snivel, I wake out of my bed with a purpose. And I've often said to my daughters, you're going to meet the man of your dreams, right? I've got two principles. One principle is the behavior I exhibit to you should be something that you can look to make sure you can test the template of the man of your dreams. Not saying I'm great, but I need you to make sure there's a bar, right? Mm-hmm. So that's one. And number two...
You've set it pretty high, fella. You've set it pretty high.
And number two, as a dad, it's a unique role. As a mum, it's a unique role. You're going to meet a boyfriend, you're going to meet a girlfriend, doesn't matter who you meet. And they're going to take a particular position or role in your psyche or in your life. But the role of dad and mum will never disappear, will never ever move. And I want my daughters to get across that it doesn't matter if they meet the boy or the girl of their dreams. It doesn't matter to me. I don't see them as competition because mum and dad are in this special role. So it means I'll never ever do anything to compromise your existence with this other person who's fundamental to you. Because I know that my role is safe. Mm-hmm. I know my position is safe. And I treat that position as sacred.
You made a very spot-on comment about, sorry to talk over you.
Yeah, no.
You made a very important comment, the fact that despite the fact that mum and dad aren't together, together you do make incredible parents, and you do create that good role model. You have the mutual respect for one another, and you both continue to bring them up to be the fantastic people they are.
Yeah. And as I mentioned earlier on, you know, my daughters are a byproduct of me and their mum. It's like an amalgam of the two of us, good and bad, right? The best and the worst of us are in them. But as two parents, we are absolutely committed to making sure our daughters have the best foundation, the best formative years, the best start in life, because we won't be there forever. So part of, with my coaching mindset, my job as a dad is to give my daughters a toolbox of tools, and also to show them how to use the tools. But through their lives, they're going to choose how they apply those tools. They may even take the wrong tool and use it for a different outcome, or use the right tool and use it differently. But my job, for as long as I'm still here, is to give you a box of tools and continue to fill up your box of tools with more tools, because those are the tools that you require for your life that are going to take you forward for the rest of your life, sadly, and most notably, when I'm no longer here. And I take that role so importantly, and I believe it, and I'm not one of these people who's a unconditional love, selfless person. I don't do that rubbish. I think there was a post that I responded to on Facebook a week ago, or I think someone mentioned something about friendship, and they mentioned about friendship being for life or being unconditional. I said, no, it's not the case. Friendship, your relationship with your partner, your relationship with your kids, not unconditional. Everything has conditions. You need to respect the behavior. You need to respect what that relationship means. You need to value it and make sure that both parties feel valuable and valued, right? So that means you need to invest time in all of that. Whether or not you've got the super badge, mum or dad, doesn't give you a pass. Doesn't mean that you have to stop working. So I still work as hard as I do every single day to be the best dad I can be. And I get it wrong sometimes, and I make mistakes sometimes. And like every parent, I get that horrible, disparaging look from your kids to say, and then you go, okay, I messed that one up. I'll put my hand up and go,
own it.
Sorry. But guess what? Tomorrow I'll try and do it differently or better. And I'll do that until I'm no longer here.
You've created an incredible foundation, and I'm fairly certain everybody watching this is more than aware of the wonderful accolades both your children have achieved in recent times. As I say, off the back of the foundations that you've set for them, not particularly a pushy father, but definitely one that directed down the right path, so that now your youngest is kind of definitely going to overshadow you as that superstar that you always thought you wanted to be. And I have to say, if I may just blow some smoke in your direction, the amount of love that everyone's shown to you, and you taking yourself back to those early days of wanting to change the world and wanting to make an impact, you got to give yourself a pat on the back, brother, because you most definitely have. That's the first and last compliment you're getting. All right. So tell us about some of the achievements that the youngest has made in the last few years.
Right.
Come on, be the proud dad. Be the proud dad.
Right. So the reason why I don't say a lot is because if you mentioned at the start that I'm quite shy about who I am and what I do, and she's the same. So crazily, I don't actually, when she was younger, in fact, both of them, if you look at my Facebook, you probably saw an awful lot of pictures of my kids when they were younger. You see a lot less now, right? Yeah. And the reason why is I'm being respectful. My daughters now have their own lives and their own path. They're no longer my possession, as your kids are somewhat when they're younger. And my youngest is even more private than I am. Now, she's been fortunate. She's done some famous things and some very visual things on TV and football that she plays. But she doesn't really talk. She doesn't want to be the person that says, look at me, look at what I've done. And so I then, by the same token, don't then, and I'd love to go, look at the amazing thing she's done. But out of respect to her, that's not what she wants. That would be what I want. That's not what she wants. So because it's not what she wants, I'm not going to do it.
Right.
That's why I don't. So yeah, I've got a near 17-year-old and a near 24-year-old. One's very, very sporty, one's not. two very, very different characters. But they're both so amazing. And I know this is going to sound really gushy, and apologies if it does. I'm really, really sorry. Everyone knows I do love my kids, and I'm very, very respectful of other people's kids. But even now, and they probably hate it. Every kid hates it. But there are times where I just stare and I just think, you're amazing. And you can't say it because you're a dad, and they just look at you and look at disgust again. But I do. I can't help that. I think they're amazing. I hope they realise the potential I know they've both got. I hope they do, but so much in my stargazing, I can't see what's going to be happening in 20 or 30 years' time. But every single day when they talk to me about what they've done and how they do what they've done, and they don't get things perfectly right, there'll be no illusion, like every other parent. There are times when we're going to bang heads, right? Because, I always used to have this thing with my kids that said, there's a line that you shouldn't cross. Guess what? I know you're going to cross it. I did, right? But I'd rather you crossed it here than here, right? And so as long as my kids cross the line there, I'm good, right? That's kind of running the line a bit close, right? I'm good. And we're good with that. If you're over there somewhere, then we've got some tough talking. Fortunately, my kids, if they're going to cross the line, maybe it's respect to me and their mum, they kind of cross it about here, which means it's more, some stern words and a little bit of grumbliness rather than, oh my God, the world's about to fall down. So, touch wood, my lovely kids, they don't send me into grey hairs. That's why I haven't really got any grey hairs. But yeah, love my daughters. I love watching other people interact with their children to a point that their children believe. Kids struggle right now to understand in this very, very faceless world, this very, very digital world, this very, very material world, this very, very artificial world, they struggle to understand what value and valuable means. So if the people that are closest to them don't show them that they're worth something, worth doesn't mean you've got amazing clothes. Worth doesn't mean you've got a lot of money in your pocket. Worth is about the values that you radiate, the behavior that you exhibit, the level of caring and empathy you have for others, how selfless you are with your peers and your friends. All of those things are attributes of value that we need to make sure the generations behind us understand are equally as important, if not more so, than the fact that you drive a big, expensive car. And that's the dynamic we have to flip. So with my daughters, that's all I do. I kind of say, I don't care about the stuff. I don't care about the stuff. I care about who you are, what you stand for, and how you use that to maximize that benefit to your friends and vice versa, right? You're expecting it back. But please don't expect your friends to be amazing to you if you're going to be pretty shitty to them, right? So I'm a values person, and I just think we need to spend more time spending time making sure our children understand that they are valued, right? It's really important, right? And then maybe they'll start walking forward into this world realizing, I don't need all that stuff. Don't need it. And it's not important to me. What's important to me is realizing that I have potential. I can use that potential in a positive way to affect others. And by doing that, others are going to do exactly the same thing back to me. Important.
Brilliant. Wow. You've nailed it for the children. How do we translate that across to our friends and this social media world that we live in?
Oh, my Lord.
Come on, let's get deep just for a moment.
Yeah, so I'm not one of these people who see social media as a sin, right? Because all social media has allowed you to do is connect with more people easier, right? It doesn't put a gun to your head to tell you how to connect and what to say when you connect. It actually gives you greater reach. Surely that's a good thing, right? So that's the first tick. Sadly, what it's also done is it means that you're less conscious about how you interact with people. You're almost finding a lot of those, because you've now got so much reach, you're almost using it in a disposable way. When you only had a finite amount of friends quite close to you, you had to be very, very careful with them because you only had a small amount of friends. When you've got 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 friends, you start treating them as if they're nothing, they almost become this disposable thing.
Well, there is a fine line between a friend and an acquaintance nowadays, right?
Absolutely right. But remember, social media has conditioned us to believe that all these people that we touch are our friends, right? So we've actually normalized how we treat all of them, and we treat all of them the same way. And we don't treat them like friends. We treat them like acquaintances, including some of the ones who should have been treated like friends.
True.
So, and remember, we can't blame social media for that. A lot of that comes from the value system that you have. Your children won't treat their friends like that. I'd like to believe you and Michelle have instilled sound values into them. So of course they're going to make the same mistakes that we make on social media, but they won't abuse it to the degrees that some people do. So I just think that some of us need to be more responsible and accountable for our own actions on social media, rather than blaming Mark Zuckerberg for putting it in front of us.
I always say that when people conduct themselves online, and I've said this many times, you should always comment as if you're sat across a table from someone, because you'd be a little bit more hesitant to use some of the language that you use if you know there's a right hook at the end of it.
And also, that's like to elaborate on that same point, the same amount of thought that you exhibit, whether it's 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and before you say something, if the person's in front of you, because you're going to check their body language, you're going to check the situation, you're going to think about, what did we speak about in the last 10 minutes before? Was that person peed off or not? Was the meal, are they enjoying their meal? Did they just get a bad phone call from their partner or their mum or their dad or their children? You absorb all that context, and then you ask what you're going to ask next. Sadly, on social media, you don't get all those signals to give you context, right? So that means you almost need to spend more time in that 10 seconds before you write your thing to say, I need to gauge some context from somewhere. Now you can either do that by looking at the messages above and beyond. Tell you what a better way would be. Why don't you actually read the damn thing the person posted rather than skimming it and coming out with some really, really quick answer? So invest yourself to understand, what's that person really saying in their post, and what are they not saying in their post? In other words, the unspoken word. In other words, context. When I understand that, now I can comment and communicate. And then you start to deliver more intentional statements that you don't have to go, I'm really, really sorry. I typed something really quickly. You still typed it, didn't you? Right? So we spend too much time apologizing.
You've been reading all my comments.
We do. We apologize for poor behavior. I don't apologize a lot, right? And the reason why is because in many cases, I've been intentional about something and it's had the wrong result, but I was quite clear about my intentions. So it's almost like I kind of got what I expected. I lit that touch paper, kind of knew, I thought the bomb might go bang, and it went bang. Can't really then say, sorry, the bomb went bang. I kind of knew it was going to go bang, right? It was one of the risks. But I will apologize if I've miscommunicated something, so the person's interpreted the message incorrectly. If I've just got the wrong context, wrong end of the stick, another way of saying that, so I've effectively just got it wrong and I've upset somebody, I'll apologize if I've just been downright out of order. But the amount of times I see people apologizing every millisecond of their life because they're not being diligent enough about their communication. If you take time to be diligent about what you're trying to say, and you almost think, what message am I trying to land in the person? And when I land this message, how are they going to act on it? How are they going to react to it? What are they going to do? If you think about, and that's how Darren Brown works. So if you look at Darren Brown, David Blaine, David Copperfield, all these people, what they do, which we don't do as humans, what we should do, which is, you can program somebody in front of you based on what you say and what you do, but you have to work back from the result that you need. So you almost say to yourself, if I want a particular result or outcome from that person, how do I need to construct the message to get what I want to happen? Right? You have to really think it through. Right? That's how hypnosis works.
That's cunning. That's cunning.
That's how hypnosis works, right? And that's, if you want to be an amazing communicator, you need to think about the person receiving the message, not about what you want to say. So you almost think, I need this person to do some sort of action. What do they need to hear to perform that action? What do they need to feel to perform that action? How do they need the message to land to perform that action? Well, you think all that through really, really quickly, then you put together your message and you deliver it. If you delivered it really well, think Darren Brown or David Blaine, you end up with people walking up and down, clucking like chickens and stuff. They don't realize why they're doing it. They've been subliminally programmed by the person delivering a message to them. That's how hypnosis works, right? So genuine communication, tip for everybody, you've heard a lot about things like NLP. If NLP's been around for 40 years, NLP uses these fundamentals, right, of how best to communicate and deliver messages to allow you to build a rapport with somebody. NLP, even basic NLP, will teach you how to deliver a message to the receiver So the receiver receives it in the way they need to receive it and absorb it to then perform an action. So even if you go and find a NLP for Dummies or NLP in YouTube, a very brief course in NLP may help you deliver way better Facebook messages, Instagram messages, messages to your partner than you've ever dreamed before, because you'll start to be more intentional about what you say and how what you say will affect the person receiving the message.
Mm-hmm. This is I kind of touched on that with the e-colors I was looking at too, with some of the workings from Mark Wilkinson.
Yeah.
That definitely helped me a lot with my communication. And you're always the first one to come back to me and say, "Nice one, Mordy. You nailed it with that."
It's true, because remember, you're writing for me, not for you. That's what people get wrong. They almost forget you're not right. You already know what you're talking about, right? You already know it. So you're writing for me. You're not writing for you. You're not speaking for you. You're speaking for me. Mm-hmm. You already know the stuff, right? That's what people always get wrong. They seem to forget. I need to say something. No, you don't. You need to make sure I hear something, right? So think about what I need.
You're so sickeningly clever and PC correct. Do you ever wake up in the morning and think, God, I'm amazing? You must do.
I wake up in the morning and think, I'm getting old, I'm tired, and I've got a whole lot of shit to do. And I'm getting old, I'm getting tired. But yeah, you know what? If you saw the camera, anyone who sees this, they'll see a lot of books here. I don't read as many books as I used to, because I just don't have the time and I'm too tired to read them. But I spent a lot of time investing in me. Right? A lot of people don't invest in themselves. Right? Whether it's via a book, whether it's via a podcast, whether it's via YouTube, whether it's by talking to your peers, invest time in you to become the best you can be. Mm-hmm. Because the best you can be for you then becomes the best you can be for everybody.
Indeed. Right? A young lady by the name of Michelle Ward comments, says, Colin needs his own show. Sign me up. Well, actually, coincidentally, Colin already has his own show, doesn't he?
Well, he doesn't have his own show. Well, you talk about my mad radio stuff.
On Deep Radio, yeah. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I always hated pirate radio. Right, so if Mikey Sherpa was on here, who originally set up London Underground, who then became House FM and 51st State and Groove Odyssey and everything else, the legendary Mikey. So all of my friends were on pirate stations in the early days. Dream Team, Ramsey and Fenn, Arkin, you name it, everybody. I couldn't stand it. I couldn't think of anything more nauseating than sitting in a room for 2 hours, looking out the window for fear that the police were going to come and arrest you and then steal your records. So every time I went on a pirate station, I'd be looking out the window like this, trying to play my music for 2 hours, crapping myself. So I always hated pirate radio. So I did it a few times way back when, and then just said, not for me, too horrible. Fast forward, and crazily, I ended up on other bits of radio. So I used to help Spoonie present his early shows on KISS in the early days, right? Way back when. But I still didn't want to be, I don't like doing this. I don't like being on the camera, as everyone knows. I like being on the other side. So it's really, really cool being there. Unless I've fallen over and destroyed my knees. I did in Sunset a few times. Shame. So what happened was about 7 years ago. I've got some hero worship to a handful of people. A lot of them have become friends. One of them is Grant. Right, Grant's way younger than me, but like the rest of us, we all thought Grant was just this unbelievable human being, and is. Way back when, and then we became good friends. And then about 7 years ago, Grant was putting together a radio station and said, I need some people on there to play some music, people I can trust. Can you do a little bit? And I said, you know what, Grant? I don't want to do anyone's radio station, nothing, but it's you, so I'll do it for a little bit. 7 years on. It's the way it's been, right? But yeah, radio isn't my thing, but even at the moment, I'm popping up a bit. So, big love to all the friends I've got. Gordon Mack lets me do shows on my soul every now and again when he wants someone to do some mad shit. So I think I've got one on the 22nd of January, which is Saturday. I said to him, can I do a Saturday night one? He went, all right. So I think it's Saturday, 22nd of January, something like that. Something like 8 till 10 or something. So I'm going to play some crazy music then. And Mikey, every now and again I pop up on House FM. And then on Sundays now, through the wonderful Lee Wright, the Leeds crew, as you have done, I pop up on that Soulful House music live stream every Sunday.
Soulful House DJs.
Soulful House DJs live stream every Sunday. But unlike yourself, who is a wonderful radio presenter, as is Scully and people like that who just are naturals, I can do it because I know how to do it. I can do it because I can talk and I can play decent music. But I'm not, radio isn't my home. This sort of thing isn't my home. I'd rather be the invisible person that no one knows exists. I'm never, dare I say it, my little one's similar. I'd rather just get my shit done and exit stage left out the corner.
It's all about the music. It's unfortunately, mate, being such a huge character, being such an inspirational character, you're never going to be one to shy away into the background. People always gravitate towards you. I've very, very rarely seen you with a smile, without a smile on your face. I don't think I've ever met anyone that could have a bad word to say about you. Where do you see all of this going? What's the plans? What's the future hold? Generally in life.
You know what, right? So I'm 56, right? And it sounds the reason why I mention it is, I've spoken to a lot of people about this. I don't know how much longer we can be on this journey. And it sounds mad to say it. And every year or so I say, you know what? It's it now, isn't it? Got to call time on this. Because old people like us way back when didn't do this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
We almost thought that when someone got to 30, 35, they were kind of pensioned off and didn't go out anymore. And here's me, 55, and all my friends are similar age, and we're partying as hard as, if not harder than we ever were. So I'll tell you what I've done a lot more of late, and I don't know if he's on this stream, big love to Mickey Zoo. I'm spending more time talking to the young ones behind, right? So if I look at, there are lots of good young DJs, young performers coming through the ranks. I'm spending more time talking to them about finding a way of making their way in this sometimes a bit cutthroat music production DJ industry that we've been part of for 40 years. I remember a young, quite brash, good looking, at times angry, very loud bloke from Birmingham.
I knew that was coming.
Way back when, right? And remember, in those days, all this music thing was a London thing, right? There was a lot of good stuff going on in Leeds and in Manchester and Nottingham and Birmingham, but London kind of ruled the roost. But this noisy bloke from Birmingham who backed himself and shouted the odds a lot, and then when it came to it, delivered, right? I don't see enough young generation coming behind with that same level of confidence to say, as you rightly said 2 weeks ago to Bobby, get me on the stage at Garage City, and guess what? When you get me on stage at Garage City, I'm going to deliver, right? So I spent a lot of time talking to the young DJs, producers, performers. A lot of people send me direct messages, and I talk about how they can make themselves better and maximize what they've got, because I want to see them realize all of their dreams about people like me get in the way, right? There's a time when the older generation, I wouldn't say disappears, but needs to kind of open the door a little bit or move to one side a little bit to let some of this younger generation through, to bring the energy, to bring the drive, to bring new thinking, in fact, to do what we did 35 years ago, right? And I don't see enough of that. So I know I'm doing it. Mickey's doing it. Mikey does some of it. Bobby and Steve. I need to see us, the older guard who've had a really great run and are still having a great run now, do more to bring tomorrow through, to allow tomorrow to be a part of today, and then we can all go forward together. So I'm doing more of that, and that's the only thing I think that'll keep me in this indefinitely. If I see that, if not,
like a mentorship kind of.
Yeah, I just like seeing people realize their potential, even if it means I've got to step aside. I'm okay, a bit like you. I back me pretty well. I know if I step aside, I'm not gone. I'll just step aside and do something else. So I don't have to hold on to that thing thinking that's all I've got, so I can't step aside. It's no biggie. I'm happy to step aside. You go there. I'll back myself to be over there. So yeah, you'll see me continue to do that. As I mentioned, a couple of years' time, when I'm properly getting old and rickety and getting too close to that number 6, then I'll probably resurrect rating winners to the various degree, and spend more time doing that, because I've always wanted to, and by then the kids will be older, and I'll be happier at making that more of my primary existence rather than a secondary or non-existence as it is today.
Right. Lots of great comments and lots of beautiful beautiful replies to everything you've been saying. I want to ask you a question, and it's
You're always
basically
worried if someone says that.
you're going to have to just shut it down and tell me to move on, or you can answer.
Oh.
Down the years, without being specific, have you ever stopped and pondered about a lifelong partner? Has it ever been something that you've thought about?
Help me. That was underarm. Jesus, Lord. Lord, oh Lord. Shit. Underarm, man.
Do we answer that or do we move on?
No. Yes, no, yes. The reason why I say that, I kind of made a bit of a pact that I didn't want to have, back to this half pregnant thing, right? I don't want to do anything half pregnant. And whilst I'm still so invested in, finishing off my studies, I've bloody got to do that next year, otherwise I'll kill myself. But whilst I'm still so invested in being so conscious in thought of my daughters, they don't need, this is a me thing rather than them. They're quite happy to say who. But I almost wanted, I didn't want to do that mixed thing until I know that they're riding off into the sunset. So, back to this whole, there's a lot happening in about 2 years, right? In a couple of years' time, my little one will be at a ripe old age, right? I'll have finished a lot of my studies. A lot of the things I wanted to do, which I've done over the last 15 years, most notably bringing up my daughters and other things, I kind of done. I always saw that at Twilight's wrong, right? Late 50s, early 60s isn't Twilight, but I almost saw that as then rather than now, because I'm just so busy now, and I really couldn't be asked with having to try and fit somebody else in who needed that much. They needed as much as me as my daughters did, and as much as me as I needed. And I just didn't have. I don't have enough, right? So that's the main reason. It's a conscious thing to say. I just couldn't really fit someone in well enough to do justice to them and me. So just not worth it. But who knows? A couple of years' time, when a lot of this madness is out the way, who knows?
You make me sick. The perfect, nigh unperfect answer. Just sitting here listening to that, though, I can picture you sitting in the restaurant on first dates with a beautiful, elegant lady in front of you, talking about your life stories. And yeah, I used to go to the Royalty. You used to go to the yeah, that was back then. Oh, mate, listen, we've been chatting for a long time. We've had so many comments, so many people have been passing through. If anyone's got any questions, bearing in mind there's a little bit of a delay, Colin, you can read all the comments people are saying, can't you? So feel free to ask Colin. So seriously, do you ever see so these 2 years, once we've got your suitors, all the suitors are lining up now, they've put 2 years in your diary. So 2 years time, a book, exhibition, seriously, is that something you're going to do? Because you are sitting on a gold mine.
Yeah, that bit's non-negotiable. So that's the reason. Louis mentioned the same thing, right? I probably, Sarah Smith. There are so many people who I've grown up with forever, who have been asking me about this forever. And again, back to the whole thing about I've just got so much to do in my life at the moment. I always said when I had some time, it's a time thing. My estimate is I could have 1.5 million images, 1.5 million, right? What the hell am I going to do 1.5 million? Even just once we've got some time, let's see if we can experiment with this. I picked out a handful of images.
Oh yeah. Do you want me to go over to the other screen?
Yeah. I don't know if it's going to work. We'll try. If it doesn't work, we'll butt out of it.
There you go. Try that.
Right. Has that worked?
Yeah.
Right. So can everyone see?
Well, obviously, people on their phones aren't really going to get a great view of this. But if you come back and watch on a big screen,
so you can see my screen now?
Yeah.
Right. So if I just before this call, I thought I'd just dig out a handful of photos and this was just some ones that were on my laptop. And it just shows you the the sheer span of images I'm going to have to go through, right? So this is old Giles, Angie Stone, a photo of Louis that I still covet because there aren't many photos.
See Lolly at the front there. How can you not see Lolly? Down to the right, bottom right.
I had never noticed that till just now.
Yeah. Well, he was the first person I knew would be there.
Oh, wow. So, yeah, but... Look,
and I think that's Karen. Go back. I think that's Karen Griffith next to her. Oh. Is it maybe?
Don't know. You know what? When I get home, I'm going to blow it up. But what I'm saying is, there aren't many photos like this of the Powerhouse, as was, right? And when I look at some of these things that will be part of the exhibition, Louis, that one I showed you, I printed. I'm going to send this to Kerry. Kerry didn't even know this existed. Roy Ayers, hopefully you'll see these things slowly change. Roy Ayers, I've got lots and lots of photos of Roy Ayers over the years. The wonderful Dave and Jonathan, somebody that I'll never stop talking about because he was one of the people who made the Southport Weekender for me such a pleasure. You know, me and Alex are really close, but way back then, Dave was just always available to you. Doesn't matter how bad things were, Dave was just Dave. Showed that one on Kerry. I think this is Avery Sunshine, early Southport, which is going back a bit. This makes me laugh because this was one of the Sounds of Blackness playlists. You'll see these things as it kind of catches up. Sounds of Blackness again. Powerhouse. This photo of Frankie Knuckles, I'd forgotten about. You'll see it pop up on the screen in a minute. I've forgotten all about and found it. So to Wardy's point of every now and again, I find some pictures. I found this and I'd never seen it. I found it and then realized, oh shit, it's a picture of Frankie smiling, doing what he's doing. And again, when you do an album or you do a tabletop book, all this sort of stuff is magical. This one of the greatest Southport days. I think this was probably
Angie Stone. No,
this was George. I think this was either
is it Shaka?
Jill Scott or Shaka. I think this is more. I think this one was Jill Scott.
Okay.
Because when Shaka, I was actually in the crowd, so I think this could be Jill Scott. This was the dawn of a superstar.
Is that the image that's behind you on the wall? Right. It is, isn't it?
Yeah. But the one that's coming up next, you know, when every now and again you know that you've seen something special. And I remember I was Southport, and everyone was going. I ran around. I said, everyone spent my time running around, running from place to place. Everyone says, you've got to get into the funk base. This bloke's amazing. And it was packed and there was no room. And I remember that was the first time I'd seen Gregory Porter. And people will tell you about how mesmerizing the first Gregory Porter performance was in this tiny little hot room. And he pretty much had a whole room of people crying their eyes out. It was spectacular. Patrice Rushen, still one of the best performers I've seen at Southport ever, because everything that she did sounded exactly the same as the damn records. To a point that I'm praying to God, someone, because I couldn't take stills and videos at the same time. So I'm praying someone got some video footage, because it really was every record that you'd ever heard sounded perfect. It sounded as if it was just amazing. This is a rare photo. Dave hated having this photo taken, hated it. So to find a picture of Alex and Dave was rare. And every now and again, every time I tried to take a photo, Dave would hide. But this is one of the rare photos I took of the two of them together. And now, obviously, because the wonderful Dave's no longer here, all these photos mean something, because they're all very, very special now. Can't get away from Sunty Beat.
Magical, such a magical place.
So I didn't go to the first one. I didn't go to the first one because I honestly didn't believe it'd work. I'd never heard of Croatia being a thing. So when Alex said they were doing Sunty Beat in Croatia, I thought, nah, no one's going to go to Croatia. It's never going to work. So I didn't actually go to the first one. And then literally, when I got the feedback back, and it was much smaller than obviously the Sunty Beat you see now, and everyone said it was the most magnificent thing ever. And then obviously I've been since, and it has been just the best, right? Francois, I've got so many pictures of Francois on Body and Soul.
That's Croatia. That picture of Francois was in Croatia at
Yeah,
Barbarella's.
yeah. So many pictures of France over the years. So many pictures of Body and Soul over the years. That's one of the ones behind me. Roddy, doing what Roddy does.
Can I get a signal? Give me a signal.
This is the picture that everyone asks for, and I printed a few of them. And if I do an exhibition, I'll do the one that's coming up next, because a lot of people don't realise how important the dome was. The dome transformed Southport. The dome was just the experience like no other experience. And so I've got a lot of dome pictures. There'll never be another dome, right? There'll never be another dome the way it was, right? So these pictures help us to remember. Body and Soul. This was, I think, at Heritage. I've got so many pictures of Body and Soul over the years. And crazily, every single picture has Joe in the middle. I've tried to take pictures where the others are there, but it's always Joe in the middle. You were at this event, if you remember. I'm sure you were at this event. This was the wonderful Monique doing what, and I remember when I took this picture, I was shattered. I was so far off the scale of tired, I actually couldn't take any more pictures. But Monique Bingham is so unbelievable, as you well know, because she was at Vocal Booth as well. I wanted to leave. I was in the process of leaving, and I just thought, no, I can't leave. Monique's on. And then I couldn't get the right picture, and I'm a big believer in light. Photography is all about light and composition. It really pisses me off when people get their lighting wrong. And so I just kept on and on till I got a picture that showed Monique doing what Monique does. And this is Monique, right? This is Monique, right? So that's why I was pleased with that picture. One of the ones, my favorites, I took it from downstairs. The legendary Grant getting the adulation that he deserves, but also hates for someone who's so amazing.
Have you noticed at the very front in the red tracksuit jacket?
Do you know what? So Owen Money's right in the very front, who sadly passed away. R.I.P. Owen. But every time I look at some of these pictures, I see people who passed away, and that's why, in a way, when I say to people, you've just got to take more and more pictures and more pictures, because none of us are here for a picture forever, but our photos and our memories will last forever. What else have I got?
That's one of the reasons why this Inspire and Be Inspired conversations take place, because these memories that we're sharing, they're documented forever, humble people like yourself who would never ever think of standing on a stage and shouting about the incredible life that you've led and will continue to lead, documented forever now.
And thank you. And I mentioned this earlier on. I said thank you earlier on. A lot of people have asked me to do this over the years, and I've refused to do it. Not for any reason beyond the fact I don't like doing it. Quite simply, I don't like doing things I don't like doing. Right, so I don't like doing it, so I didn't want to do it. But Bobby inspired me. Bobby was so authentic, explaining to people what him and his family are going through, and he was compelling. And if you know Bobby, the energy and the infectiousness that came across 2 weeks ago, whatever it is Bobby. And then when you mentioned it to me, I could have easily done my normal, we'll get round to it, which is what I've always said every time you mention it. But then when I saw Bobby being so majestic and so authentic, landing such a intimate family story, I just thought, to your point, stop being such an arse, and get your shit together.
Get out of the way of yourself.
Yeah, sometimes you can, cold cock. Sometimes you can get too caught up in your fears or your dislikes. And as you say, what you're doing now and what you've been doing for so long is bigger than you and bigger than me. The stories that you're putting down will be stories watched by our children, our children's children, long after we've gone. And they are a chronicle of the wonderful life experiences that we've been through. And that's why, thank you to you, because what you're doing is essential, and it takes a lot of work. People don't realize just how hard it is. It takes a lot of time. And then you have to give up 2 hours of your life to let someone like me ramble on about my life. So thank you very much.
Mate, I could sit and listen to you all night long, and I enjoy it so much. These photographs, is that the incredible photos. So at the beginning of that, let me make sure I'm pressing the right button. We're going back to here. So yes, a book is definitely going to happen at some point.
Yeah, so there's no doubt about it. It will be about 2 years from now, because the biggest challenge I've got is to pull everything out of storage. It'll probably take, as you see when other people do this. I was listening to Giles, and Giles has put out a lot of books, and he was saying about how long it takes to get all the content together. It could take me 18 months just to look through images, right? Fortunately, and touch some wood here, I don't, it's a shock to many people, I don't retouch my images. I don't.
I was just about to say, I was going to say earlier on, I'm not even going to start you on the conversation about image composition, post photography skills.
I don't retouch them. So I'm quite fortunate, because I learned to take photos in the years before digital, right? So just to give you an early thing, Southport, think of Southport Weekender, in the middle of, whether it's Fleetwood or Pontins or Ainsdale, you lot will all be getting drunk or somewhere in a chalet. I'd do the Friday night. This is what used to happen. Because remember, everything's negative, so I can't see anything. So I do the Friday night, and then when everybody else is asleep, I drive into Southport, into the town centre, and go into Boots or something and take two random rolls of films, and develop them in 1 hour, and sit there with my hands together praying to God, praying that I've either got the lighting right, or I've got the composition right, or something in the camera isn't flawed, because there was no way of seeing what you took. So I learned photography having to take the perfect image, because you don't ever see it when you got home or something for an event and you developed it. There were some early cases where I actually took a black and white development kit, and I masked off the bathroom, and I actually developed images in trays in the bathroom as black and white negative prints in the bathroom in a chalet. So when you learn photography that way, when this digital thing comes along, photography becomes easy. So that means I don't know how to use Photoshop. I told you a lot before, I don't know how to use Photoshop, never known it, I never will do. If I take an image, for example, any of the images that you see, this is as it came out the camera. No retouching, no Photoshop, no nothing. So where I will get a time saving that others won't get, and you do a little bit, if you're going to print something in a book, you do something, some refining. But I don't have to do all the faffing that other people do, where they sit there for hours in Photoshop. The image that you see is the image that I take, and I spend, back to this whole thing about communication, I'll spend seconds beforehand to make sure the light's right, composition's right. Look at any of my albums on Facebook. You won't see duplicate pictures. The reason why, I don't do that. What's the point of me taking a picture that does that, and that, and that, and that, and that, the same bloody person? It's a waste of bloody time.
So this means when people see you with the camera in your hand on a stage, leave him alone. He's working. Yeah. He's trying to capture that moment.
Waiting for a moment, and then you do that. And you wonder why.
Don't be tugging at him.
You wonder why there are times when I've been waiting, or what often happens, I'll have seen an artist do something. So because humans are creatures of habit, I know if that artist has done something once, they're going to do it again at some point in that song. So I'm actually waiting for that. And I'm waiting. And I'm talking about, I've got my exposure right, I've got my camera ready, I've got my lighting right, and I'm absolutely waiting for them, right? So if I've been waiting 2.5 minutes for, I don't know, Dawn Tallman to hit a high note, and I know how her head's going to go, because I saw her head like that 5 minutes ago. And you'll see me almost fixed in a position like that. And then someone grabs my shirt just as I'm about to take the image. I mean, you can't literally, there are times when I actually want to squeeze somebody for doing that. And that's the reason why. It's because I don't retouch photos. I've got to take the image that is there as it is. So I haven't got any other vehicle to change it.
So anybody who understands about that, I mean, really will know what a talent that is and why it is so very important.
But it also means you can be quite quick. So
have a quick look on your phone or on your screen, and you can see some of the people who've been commenting. Arkin, particularly, Mr. Jones, he says, a wonderful evening. Colin, I'm so proud of you, man. Truly inspirational. Arkin, someone that you mentioned earlier on. Jeremy Braithwaite, been listening intently all evening. Just so many people. Jans as well, as I know you and Jans have spoken extensively about photography. Someone I'm sure he looks up to you.
Yeah, there's somebody, who picked up the camera based on love and took the time to understand how to use it. Not enough people do that. And now he produces wonderful pieces of work, right? So, you know, that's an example. Invest the time to become the best. Forget about the camera. You can give me a pinhole camera. You can give me a mobile phone camera. You've seen me at Vocal Booth because you banned me from using cameras. So you've seen me at Vocal Booth doing my sneaky camera phone thing and whatever it is.
Why did I ban you? Explain why.
Because you want me to enjoy myself.
There you go.
Right? And you know what? Well done you, because of that, there are way too many pictures of me jumping up and down like an idiot or doing some crappy dad dancing in the corner. But yeah, if you learn photography and you learn lighting and composition, whether it's a mobile phone camera, a pinhole camera, or the £3,000 camera everyone buys, the end results can be the same.
Wow. Photography and the techniques is a conversation that could quite easily roll on for another 2 hours. 2 hours we've been talking now, you know. 2 hours. Wow. Is there anything that you thought of, you were sure we were going to discuss that we haven't broached? Or do you think we've covered all the important stuff?
I didn't expect you to put me out here on the blasted stream, so that one's a shock. Didn't see that one coming. So, thanks for that one. No, do you know what? Thank you. Right? Quite simply. Thank you. You know, I don't do this. I don't. And I don't enjoy this. I'm not comfortable here like this. I'm not. If there was no camera, I'd be fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's just talking. I'm not comfortable doing this. It's you because you're you that I'm doing this. And I'm very respectful of what you put together as a platform and what you're delivering to the benefit of so many people. So it's thanks to you, really. I'll thank you. I've got to thank all the people who have seen this now or seen this next. The reason why I say that is through the photography that I do, all I'm doing is recording memories. And I almost feel privileged to be in that situation, in that moment that somebody's got to be able to record that memory. And we're sharing the memory together. So even though I'm recording it, we're also sharing it. So when I look at 40 years of capturing some of the most seismic and significant memories of our time, all I can do is say thank you to the people that are probably coming through this screen and may come through other screens. And then the gift of being able to play music. You know, I think I was talking, it might have been Mickey Zoo or somebody. And I was talking about music and I said, I play music that I like, to people that I like, the way I like. Because I haven't got any airs and graces. And I've got no desire to be someone. I don't want to be held up anywhere. And because I haven't got any of that ego baggage, I just play music in a way that I'm as invested in the music I'm playing as I'm hoping the people are listening to it. I'm not saying I need to mix in a certain way so everyone sees me using this fader in a certain way or using the... I don't actually give a shit, right? And
unless someone puts a rotary mixer in front of you, then it's
Oh my Lord. Paul Bozak, good friend of mine, love what he does. Masterpiece creations. Put it in front of me, I feel like a 7-year-old child.
No rotary mixer for Colin. No rotary mixer. It's
banned at Groove Odyssey in Ibiza. So me and Grant, so well done Grant, because Grant's important and famous. So Grant can say, I want a Pioneer mixer, so put it there. So I'll make sure that there's a Pioneer mixer next to the Bozak. So me and Grant can use these up and down and left, right mixers. But yeah, you know what? I'm just honoured. I'm honoured to have been part of this amazing journey we've all been part of. The famous friends that you discuss, they're no more or less famous than everybody I know. I don't do all of that. Whether you're this person with your inherent fame or you're a person that hasn't got any of that secondary fame that everyone's giving you, it doesn't actually matter to me. It doesn't matter one jot. Because to my point about this whole friends, acquaintances, I'm going to treat all of you exactly the same. And I'm going to treat you with the same level of respect, the same level of decency that I treat my own kids, right? So if you're in my circle as a person that's giving me friendship, giving me warmth, I'm going to treat you the same way. And all these people, and it's thousands of people in this 40 years of Southport, Sunsea Beat, 51st State, Groove Odyssey, the list is endless. They all treat me in a beautiful way. And I'd like to believe stories I tell for them pays them back in the way that they treat me. And as long as I can continue to do that, I'll keep doing it. And the day that I don't believe I can do that justice, I'll stop.
Colin Williams, we all salute you. We love you. What an incredible story that you've just told. And there is really no way that I can end this other than to say thank you for your time. I'm sure when you read back through all of the hundreds of comments that have been coming through during this conversation, you will give yourself a little bit of a pat on the back, and you will allow yourself to be a bit proud because you're very, very humble. But you'll be standing 10 feet tall tomorrow. I know you will. I am going to say a few farewells to everybody. So you and I are done. Thank you, Colin. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you, everybody. It's been amazing. I really appreciate you taking time out your evening to listen to us having our old boys chat.
Indeed. Right, let me go and say goodbye to everyone. Thank you, brother. I love you. Wow, there you go. Colin has gone. I'm going to say goodbye to him. Thank you guys for taking time out of your evening. We could sit and listen to him all evening, couldn't we? I am going to say a very few words and allow you to end. But what I would like to do is to focus on what it is I'm trying to achieve here, because there's many people who won't have seen these conversations before. Inspire and Be Inspired are a series of interviews I've been conducting pretty much all throughout 2021. On a Tuesday evening, I've been covering so many different topics, music related, business related, mental health related. Please take a look over on the wall for Inspire and Be Inspired. You can also subscribe to me on YouTube. I do load the videos onto my YouTube channel so you can watch them at your leisure. I also do record them as audio podcasts, and they get sent out via my djandyward.net website. Pretty much many of the people who join me on a regular basis are aware of that, but I know there are a lot of Colin's friends who will be watching this for the first time, so please do check out what I've done in the past. I can't even keep up with all these conversations, all these comments, forgive me. So many people here who support me regularly. Thank you so much. All of Colin's friends. Colin jumps in and says, thank you, everyone. I can't even keep up. Thank you, guys. If you can see on your screen here, next Tuesday, which is I think I might be incorrect here. I'm not sure. I have a conversation with two legends out of Birmingham. You just heard Colin talking about some of the legends from his manor. Well, two guys who are definitely there at the foundations of some of the biggest things to happen in Birmingham are DJ Dick and Adam Regan. It's a series of conversations I'm calling Brum as Fuck, and it doesn't seem right in my head that it's the 14th of December, but I may be wrong. But you'll see me promote it anyway throughout the week. Definitely another really interesting conversation. Guys, I've taken up way more than your time than I intended. So thank you so very much. I am going to come back and read all of the comments. I am going to do my very best to reply to them all. But for now, I just say a massive thank you again to Colin. Thank you to everyone for passing through. And I'll say very quickly so I can get it out, a massive thank you to Steve. I wish you all the very best for tomorrow, my friend. We will all be thinking of you. Okay. I end by saying farewell to Amanda. Bye, everybody.